The testing chamber stretched across 3 floors of the Galactic Council's assessment station. Dr. Sarah Chun stood behind reinforced glass, watching as the xenobiologists completed their final measurements on the human volunteer. The young man looked small next to the equipment designed for species twice his size. Subject exhibits no natural armor plating, the lead examiner announced, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she read from her datapad. Skin tears under minimal pressure. Internal organs are exposed and vulnerable. No regenerative capabilities beyond basic wound closure, which takes days to complete. Sarah kept her expression neutral. She had seen the preliminary results. She knew what was coming. The examiner continued through her list with clinical precision. No venom glands. No retractable claws. No exoskeleton. No redundant organ systems. Vision limited to a narrow spectrum. Hearing range significantly below galactic average. Lifespan of approximately 100 cycles, which places them in the lower quartile of sentient species. Around the observation gallery, representatives from other species watched with varying degrees of interest. The Krell ambassador shifted his massive bulk, his scales catching the light. He could survive in hard vacuum for up to an hour. The Thoraxian delegate's exoskeleton could withstand direct plasma fire. Even the small Zixtar, often mocked for their size, produced acid blood that made them dangerous to kill. Physical strength assessment? Another examiner asked. Below average. They compensate with tool use, but their actual muscle efficiency is unremarkable. They cannot lift more than approximately twice their body weight, and only for brief periods. The tests went on for 3 more hours. Each category revealed the same truth. Humanity ranked at or near the bottom of every physical measurement the Council used to evaluate species. When the examiners tested the volunteer's ability to survive environmental extremes, he nearly died from heat exposure at temperatures the Krell found comfortable. The cold tolerance test ended even faster. "They're very fragile," one of the younger examiners whispered, though the translation units picked it up anyway. Finally, the lead examiner faced the gallery and delivered her formal conclusion. Humanity represents a successful but unexceptional example of evolution on a Class 3 death world. Their persistence hunting strategy and endurance capabilities are noteworthy, but these advantages are insufficient to offset their numerous physical limitations. They lack the robust defensive and offensive capabilities common to spacefaring species. She paused, and Sarah could see something like sympathy in the alien's eyes. "In our professional assessment, humanity would benefit from protected species status. We recommend assignment to the Inner Colonies region, away from contested territories and high-risk zones. They are not equipped for the realities of the wider galaxy." The vote came quickly. 43 species in favor, none opposed. Humanity would be protected, sheltered, kept safe like children who wandered too close to a dangerous street. Sarah stood to address the Council, and the chamber quieted. "We accept the Council's designation," she said simply, "and we thank you for your consideration of our safety." The relief in the room was obvious. The Council members had expected protests, anger, perhaps even threats to withdraw from galactic society. Instead, humanity's representative had agreed without argument. Several delegates nodded approvingly at such wisdom and maturity. What they didn't see was the message Sarah sent to Earth's Defense Committee as she left the chamber. "Assessment complete. They've underestimated us in exactly the ways we expected. Proceed to Phase 2. Back on Earth, the message reached General Marcus Webb in his underground command center. He read it twice, then looked at the wall of screens showing humanity's secret construction projects. Shipyards hidden in asteroid fields. Research stations in the outer system. Weapons that didn't exist in any galactic database. "They think we're weak," his second-in-command said. Webb shook his head. They think we're fragile. There's a difference. Fragile things break easily. Weak things can't fight back. He turned to face his staff. Humans aren't fragile. We're just soft on the outside. And that's made us very, very good at taking hits and surviving them. He pulled up the files they'd been compiling for the past decade. Information on every council species, gathered through trade, cultural exchange, and more clandestine means. Each species had their strengths, impressive and intimidating. But each strength came with a corresponding weakness, a vulnerability born from the same evolutionary path that had made them powerful. The Krell regenerate because they never developed strong immune systems, Webb explained to his team. The Thoraxians have armor because they can't heal quickly. The Ethereals are telepathic because they're physically weak and needed coordination to survive. Every advantage came at a cost. And humans? Someone asked. We're the species that never specialized. We stayed generalists because our planet kept trying to kill us in different ways. Predators, diseases, climate shifts, other humans. We couldn't afford to be perfect at one thing. We had to be adequate at everything. Sarah's transport arrived at the lunar station 3 days later. She found Webb waiting in the observation lounge, watching Earth turn slowly below them. They bought it completely, she said. Protected species status. Low-risk zones. They'll leave us alone to develop at our own pace. Good. That gives us time? Time for what? Marcus, we really are the weakest species by their measurements. That wasn't propaganda. Our volunteer nearly died during routine testing. Webb smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Do you know what happens to the strongest, most specialized species when their environment changes? When conditions shift in ways their evolution didn't prepare them for. Sarah thought about it, her background in xenobiology providing the answer. They die. Quickly and completely. Specialists thrive in stable environments, but collapse when things change. And the galaxy, Webb said, is about to get very, very unstable. I've seen the deep space reports the Council is suppressing. Strange signals. Ships that don't come back. Something's out there, Sarah. Something the strong, specialized species aren't going to be ready for. He turned from the window. But humans? We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and near-extinction events. Not because we were strong, but because we were weak enough to bend instead of breaking. Adaptable enough to change when change was required. Sarah looked at Earth below, at the billions of soft, fragile, vulnerable humans going about their lives. So we let them think we're weak. We don't let them think anything, Webb corrected. We are weak. By every measure they use, we're the weakest species in the Council. That's not a lie. He headed toward the door, then paused. But weakness and survival aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing. And humanity is very, very good at surviving. The assessment report made its way through official channels, filed and archived. In the galleries and meeting rooms of the Galactic Council, humanity became a footnote, a minor species to be protected and largely ignored. The strong species turned their attention back to matters of importance, to their conflicts and competitions, to their specialized dominance of their particular niches. And on Earth, in 100 hidden facilities, humanity prepared for the day when being the weakest species would matter more than anyone could imagine. The first reports came from the outer spiral mining colonies. 3 Krell habitats went silent within a week. Their automated distress signals the only indication something had gone wrong. When the response teams arrived, they found the stations intact but empty of living occupants. The Krell were dead, every single one. Their bodies twisted and deformed by uncontrolled cellular growth. It's spreading through the ethereal network, Dr. Amaria Conquo told the Emergency Council session. She'd been working for 3 days straight, ever since Earth's monitoring stations picked up the outbreak. Their telepathic connections are carrying it faster than ships can travel. Every ethereal in contact with an infected individual becomes a new vector. The council chamber, usually a place of careful debate and diplomatic posturing, had descended into chaos. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding answers that nobody had. The plague, as it was already being called, was moving faster than anyone had believed possible. The Thoraxians have sealed their worlds, someone reported. Complete quarantine. Nobody in or out. Amari shook her head. That won't work. The virus is already inside their populations. Sealing the exoskeletons just traps it with the victims. We're seeing mortality rates above 80% in their populations. What about the Zixtar? Another delegate asked desperately. Their acid blood makes the infection spread faster. The virus uses their own defensive mechanisms as a growth medium. Amari pulled up the genetic analysis on the main display. This isn't a natural pathogen. It's a weapon, probably from the ancient wars. Someone dug it up, and now it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, targeting the strong. The room went quiet. 17 species had reported outbreaks. 9 more had gone dark completely. The great civilizations of the galaxy, built on strength and specialization, were falling like dominoes. What about humans? The council's medical coordinator finally asked, "Have you detected any cases in human space?" Amari took a breath. Yes, we have cases on 12 colony worlds and 3 stations. Current casualties number approximately 47,000. The number hung in the air. 4 species with protected status in low-risk zones. Even a small outbreak should have been devastating. One delegate did the math quickly. That's less than 3% of your exposed population. 3.2%, Amari confirmed. And the infection rate is slowing. Our medical teams have isolated 2 distinct strains and are working on a 3rd. We expect to have preliminary treatments within 2 weeks. How? The question came from a dozen voices at once. Amari pulled up a comparison chart showing immune responses across species. Our immune systems are inefficient by galactic standards. Hyperactive, prone to overreaction, constantly fighting off infections. We get sick from everything. Our evolution was an arms race against thousands of different pathogens. We never developed the elegant, efficient, specialized immune responses that most of you possess. She highlighted the Krell data. The Krell immune system is incredibly efficient at handling physical trauma and regenerating tissue, but it's optimized for those tasks. When the plague attacks, it co-opts that regeneration, turning it into uncontrolled growth. The more efficient the system, the faster the virus kills. And the ethereals? Their telepathic network is their greatest strength. It allows instant communication across light years. But the plague uses those same neural pathways to spread. Every connection becomes a vector. Their efficiency has become a vulnerability. A Thoraxian delegate's voice cracked through the speakers. You're saying we're dying because we're too strong? You're dying because you're specialized. The plague is designed to exploit specialization, to turn your greatest strengths into weaknesses. Amari pulled up the human immune response data. Humans never specialized. Our immune systems are paranoid, aggressive, and wasteful. They attack everything that looks suspicious. Most of the time, this makes us sick for no reason. But against something like the plague, that paranoid inefficiency is keeping us alive. The Council's medical coordinator, a Krell, who had lost 3 family members already, leaned forward. Can you help us? It was the question Amari had been waiting for, the one that terrified her. Maybe, but we need data. Complete biological profiles, genetic sequences, immune system specifications. Information that most species consider classified at the highest levels. You want us to share our most protected secrets with the weakest species in the Council. Amari met his gaze. I want you to decide if you'd rather die with your secrets or live by sharing them. Because from what I'm seeing, you have maybe 6 months before every major civilization in this galaxy collapses. We can't save you without understanding your biology, and understanding your biology requires trust. The debate lasted 4 hours. Some species refused outright, retreating to their home systems to handle the crisis internally. But most, faced with extinction, made the choice to share. The data began flowing to Earth's research stations. Terabytes of information about alien biology that humanity had never had access to before. Amari assembled teams from every human medical facility she could reach. Xenobiologists, virologists, immunologists, and researchers who had spent their careers studying alien life. They worked in shifts around the clock, trying to understand how the plague attacked each species and how to stop it. The thoracian chitin structure is breaking down, one team reported. The virus produces an enzyme that dissolves it from the inside. Can we block the enzyme? Maybe, but we need to test it. Do we have any thoracian volunteers? They did. Thousands of them, desperate enough to trust their lives to human medicine. The first treatments failed. So did the second and third. But the fourth showed promise, and by the 6th attempt, they had something that worked. Not perfectly, but well enough to drop the mortality rate from 80% to 40%. The ethereals were harder. Their telepathic network meant that traditional quarantine was impossible. A human neurologist named Dr. James Park proposed something radical. What if they could modify the human approach to the virus and adapt it to ethereal biology? Our immune systems attack indiscriminately, he explained. We can't make the ethereal systems work like ours, but we can maybe teach them to be less efficient, to waste energy attacking things that might not be threats. It sounded insane, deliberately making an immune system worse at its job. But the ethereals, facing extinction, agreed to try. The first test subjects received modified treatments that essentially made their immune responses more human-like, aggressive, paranoid, and inefficient. It worked. Barely, but it worked. The ethereals who received the treatment survived at 3 times the rate of the untreated population. Word spread quickly. The human colony ships, once viewed as refugee vessels for a protected species, became the most sought-after destinations in the galaxy. Sick and dying aliens traveled to human space, hoping that the weakest species might have answers that the strong species lacked. Amari found herself working 20-hour days, coordinating responses across dozens of worlds. She lost count of how many species she'd treated, how many desperate families she'd faced. The plague wasn't showing any signs of slowing, and even with treatments, the casualties kept mounting. On the 93rd day of the crisis, she received a message from the Council coordinator. Dr. Okonkwo, I wanted you to know that the preliminary numbers are in. Galaxy-wide mortality rate is holding at 42%. Without your intervention, our projections showed 90% or higher. Amari stared at the numbers. 42%. Billions dead. But billions more alive because humanity's weakness had, for once, been exactly what the galaxy needed. The Council is voting to grant humanity full membership status, the coordinator continued. No more protected species designation. You've earned a voice in galactic affairs. That's not why we did this, Amari said quietly. I know. That's exactly why you're getting it. The plague eventually burned itself out, as plagues do. The treatments got better, the mortality rates dropped, and slowly, the galaxy began to recover. But it was a different galaxy now. The strong species had learned what it felt like to be vulnerable, and the weak species had learned that their weakness might be their greatest asset. In the council chambers. When they finally resumed regular sessions, Sarah Chun sat in a new section reserved for full member species. The Krell delegate, who had questioned sharing biological data, approached her after the meeting. "Your people saved my family," he said. "I wanted to thank you." Sarah nodded. "We did what we could." "You did more than that. You showed us that strength isn't always what we think it is." He paused, his massive form seeming somehow diminished. "The galaxy is changing, Ambassador Chun. This plague, it's shown us how fragile we really are. How our specializations made us vulnerable." "Every species has vulnerabilities," Sarah replied. "Even humans. We just got lucky that ours didn't line up with this particular threat." "Perhaps. Or perhaps you were right all along, and we were the ones who were wrong about what makes a species truly strong." Sarah watched him leave, then looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Most of the seats were empty now, species too depleted to send delegates or too busy rebuilding to care about galactic politics. The council that had judged humanity as weak and in need of protection was gone, replaced by something smaller and more humble. But Amari's words echoed in her mind. Maybe 6 months before civilization collapses. They'd survived this threat, but what about the next one? The plague had been sleeping for millennia before someone woke it up. What else was out there, waiting? She thought about General Webb's warning, about the strange signals and missing ships. The galaxy had changed, but not in ways that made humanity's weakness less relevant. If anything, the plague had proven that being the weakest species meant being the most adaptable, the most likely to survive when everything changed, and something told her that everything was about to change again. The harvesters appeared without warning in the outer colonies. Not 1 or 2 ships, but thousands of them, emerging from jump points in perfect geometric formations. They were massive constructs of dark metal and cold logic, machines that had been traveling through deep space for longer than most civilizations had existed. Admiral Kenji Tanaka watched the first engagement from his command ship orbiting New Sydney. The Krell defense fleet, still recovering from the plague but determined to prove their strength, moved to intercept. 12 heavy cruisers, each one a masterpiece of military engineering, each one capable of destroying a small moon. The battle lasted 8 minutes. "They're analyzing our tactics in real time," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "Every move we make, they counter within seconds. They're learning." Kenji had seen the intelligence reports. The harvesters were machines, remnants of an ancient war, programmed to strip inhabited systems of resources on a regular cycle. They'd done this before, probably many times. The ruins scattered across the galaxy suddenly made horrible sense. "Pull back," he ordered. "Get everyone behind the defense grid." But the harvesters didn't pursue. They simply processed the Krell ships for raw materials and moved on to their primary targets: population centers, industrial complexes, and military installations. They were efficient. They were precise. They were unstoppable. The Thoraxian fleet tried next, deploying their legendary siege tactics. The harvesters adapted within 3 engagements, adjusting their targeting systems to prioritize the Thoraxians' armored vessels. The Ethereals attempted coordinated multi-fleet maneuvers across their telepathic network. The harvesters identified the command ships and eliminated them first, fragmenting the coordination. Within 2 weeks, 17 species had lost their primary defensive fleets. The harvesters moved through space like a geometric plague, calculating optimal approaches and overwhelming any resistance with mathematical precision. Then they reached human space. Kenji stood in his ready room, looking at the hodgepodge fleet that made up Earth's defensive force. 2 aging carriers from the pre-council days, a dozen frigates of various designs, 3 converted cargo haulers that some optimistic engineer had strapped weapons onto, and his flagship, the Tenacity, which had been built in a shipyard that couldn't decide if it wanted to copy Krell or Thoraxian design and had ended up doing neither particularly well. "It's a mess," his first officer, Commander Lisa Park, said flatly. "It's our mess," Kenji replied. He pulled up the tactical data on the Harvester's previous engagements. Every fight followed patterns. The Harvesters identified the strongest targets, calculated optimal attack vectors, and executed with machine perfection. They were designed to fight the way strong species fought, with organization, doctrine, and overwhelming force. "They're expecting us to fight like everyone else," Kenji said slowly. "We don't have the ships to fight like everyone else." "Exactly." He began marking positions on the tactical display. "Which is why we won't." "Commander, how many civilian ships are still in the system?" Lisa checked her data. "About 40. Mostly cargo transports and mining vessels." "Why?" "Because the Harvesters prioritize military vessels based on their weapons and power signatures. What if we make them think our civilian ships are military targets?" "That's insane. Those ships can't take a single hit. They don't need to. They just need to exist long enough to mess up the Harvesters' targeting priorities." Kenji pulled up more data. "Every engagement, the Harvesters calculate the optimal strategy based on our fleet composition. They're brilliant at optimization. But what if we give them a fleet that doesn't make sense? That can't be optimized." The defense of New Sydney began 6 hours later. The Harvesters entered the system in their standard formation, their sensors immediately identifying the 13 human warships as primary targets. They moved to engage with calculated precision. Then the civilian ships activated their modified transponders, broadcasting power signatures that made them look like military vessels. The Harvesters' targeting systems flagged 43 new contacts. Their formation shifted, recalculating optimal attack vectors. Before they could complete the calculation, the actual military ships opened fire, not at the Harvesters, but at the civilian ships. Precisely aimed shots that didn't destroy the transports, but damaged their engines, sending them drifting on unpredictable courses through the battlefield. The Harvesters' targeting system struggled. The battlefield had transformed into chaos, with targets moving in ways that violated every tactical doctrine. The machines adapted, refocusing on the confirmed military vessels. That's when Captain Maria Santos, commanding the cargo hauler Resilient Hope, made her decision. Her ship was already damaged, her crew already evacuated. She aimed her ship at the largest Harvester's sensor array and engaged her engines. "Kenji, you better make this count," she transmitted, then cut the link. The Resilient Hope, 5,000 tons of cargo hauler, and the last of Captain Santos' coffee supply, slammed into the Harvester at full thrust. The impact shouldn't have mattered. It was a minor collision, barely a fraction of the Harvester's mass, but it destroyed the sensor array. And for precious seconds, the Harvester was blind. Human ships swarmed it, focusing fire on the damaged section. The Harvester's escorts moved to assist, breaking formation. More civilian ships, piloted by volunteers, rammed other Harvesters or simply drifted into their paths, creating navigational hazards that forced the machines to maneuver. "They can't account for this," Lisa reported. "Their tactical algorithms keep trying to find the pattern, but there isn't one. We're not following any doctrine they recognize." Kenji watched a mining ship, piloted by a crew that should have evacuated hours ago, use its industrial drilling laser to carve through a Harvester's hull. It was a ridiculous weapon for space combat, slow and short-ranged. But the Harvesters had never encountered it before, and their shields weren't calibrated for that specific frequency. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the humans had lost 11 ships and 400 crew members, including Captain Santos. But 3 Harvesters were destroyed, and the rest had retreated to regroup and recalculate. "They'll be back," Lisa said, watching the Harvesters disappear toward the outer system. "And next time, they'll know our tactics." Then we'll use different tactics, Kenji replied. That's the advantage of not having any doctrine. We can't deviate from a plan if we never had a plan to begin with. The news of New Sydney spread quickly. The council, operating from scattered mobile headquarters, requested immediate access to human tactical data. What they found confused them. There's no pattern, the Thoraxian military advisor said, reviewing the battle records. You lost ships that could have been saved. You use suicide tactics that waste resources. You employed civilian vessels in military operations, which is against every convention of warfare. We know, Kenji replied via the communication link. That's why it worked. But it's inefficient, illogical. You took casualties you didn't need to take. We took casualties we could afford to take. The harvesters are designed to fight efficient, logical opponents. They calculate optimal strategies and counter them. But humans aren't optimal. We're messy, we're unpredictable, and we make decisions that don't make sense to a machine intelligence. Sarah Chun, listening from the council chambers, added her perspective. The harvesters are perfect examples of optimization. They've refined their tactics over millions of years, removing any inefficiency. But optimization requires predictability. You have to know what you're optimizing for. Humans optimize for survival, not efficiency. And survival sometimes means doing things that look wasteful or illogical. A Krell admiral who had lost his entire fleet to the harvesters spoke up. Are you saying that your weakness saved you again? Not our weakness, Kenji corrected. Our refusal to specialize. The harvesters beat you because you fought the way you've always fought, using the tactics that made your species dominant. They beat the Thoraxians because your armor and heavy weapons made you predictable. They beat the Ethereals because your coordination made you efficient. And they struggled against humans because we've never been good enough at warfare to develop a proper doctrine. We throw everything at the problem and hope something works. It's not glorious and it's not efficient, but against an enemy that expects optimization, it's effective. The council debated for 3 days. Some species argued for adopting human tactics wholesale. Others resisted, unwilling to abandon the military traditions that had served them for millennia. In the end, they compromised. Joint task forces, combining each species' strengths with human unpredictability. The harvesters returned to New Sydney 4 weeks later with adjusted algorithms. They found a combined fleet waiting for them. Krell armor, Thoraxian weapons, ethereal coordination, and human chaos. The battle was brutal, but the harvesters withdrew again. Their optimization protocols, unable to account for a military force that combined efficiency with deliberate inefficiency. They're learning, Lisa warned Kenji. Eventually, they'll adapt to our chaos. Then we'll have to get more chaotic, Kenji replied. He was exhausted, running on stimulants and coffee, but there was something like pride in his voice. The harvesters are machines. They'll keep trying to optimize, to find the perfect counter. And we'll keep doing things that don't make sense until they run out of processing power. Sarah, watching from orbit, thought about the pattern emerging across these crises. The plague, the harvesters, and whatever came next. The galaxy kept throwing challenges at its inhabitants, and each challenge seemed designed to exploit strength and specialization. It's almost like something is testing us, she said to Amari, who had come to observe the fleet movements. Testing what? Whether we can survive being strong. Whether optimization is the path to longevity or extinction. Sarah pulled up historical data on galactic civilizations. We keep finding ruins, Amari. Species that rose to incredible heights and then vanished. What if they all fell into the same trap? Becoming so specialized, so perfectly adapted to their environment that they couldn't handle change? And humans? We never got the chance to specialize. Earth kept changing on us. Ice ages, climate shifts, supervolcanoes, plagues. We survived by staying flexible, by never committing fully to one strategy. She looked at the combined fleet maneuvering in the distance. Maybe that's our real strength. Not that we're weak, but that we never stopped being generalists. The harvesters withdrew from the sector entirely 3 months later, their calculations determining that the resource cost of harvesting human space exceeded the expected gain. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was survival, which was all that mattered. In the rebuilt council chambers, the assembled species faced a new reality. The strong had fallen, the specialized had failed, and the weakest species in the galaxy had become the bridge between extinction and adaptation. 5 years after the harvesters withdrew, the Galactic Council convened in its newly constructed headquarters orbiting New Geneva, a human colony world selected for its symbolic neutrality. The chamber was smaller than the old one, built for the reality of what the galaxy had become rather than what it once was. Dr. Sarah Chun, now elderly and moving with careful deliberation, stood before the assembled representatives. Her hair had gone completely gray during the plague years, and the harvester crisis had added lines to her face that made her look a decade older than she was. But her eyes remained sharp as she addressed the council. 10 years ago, you told us we were the weakest species in the galaxy. You were right. By every measure you used, humanity ranked last. We had no natural armor, no regeneration, no telepathy, no advantages beyond persistence and stubbornness. She paused, looking around the chamber. And yet, we're all still here. Not because humanity was secretly strong all along, but because weakness, properly understood, is a form of strength. She activated the display, showing a timeline of galactic history. Before the plague, 47 species held seats on this council. We've lost 16 completely. 22 more have populations reduced below viable levels. 9 species survive, but no longer have the infrastructure to maintain interstellar presence. That leaves us with 10 functioning civilizations, and all of them learned the same lesson. Specialization is a luxury that the universe no longer permits. A young Krell delegate raised his hand. His scales were lighter than his predecessors, marking him as barely past adolescence by his species standards. Most of the old guard hadn't survived. Ambassador Chun, you speak of weakness as strength, but we've all studied the human response to these crises. You succeeded through sacrifice and adaptation. Is that not simply another form of strength? Sarah smiled. That's the question, isn't it? What makes a species strong? The old council defined strength through physical capabilities, armor, weapons, regeneration, power. But I'm going to argue for something different. I call it the paradox doctrine. She pulled up comparison charts showing evolutionary paths. Every species in this chamber achieved spaceflight by perfecting something. The Krell mastered regeneration and physical resilience. The Thoraxians developed unbreakable armor. The Ethereals evolved telepathic coordination. Each of you reached for the stars by becoming the absolute best at your particular adaptation. And humans? The Krell delegate asked. We perfected nothing. We couldn't. Our planet wouldn't let us. Earth is what xenobiologists call a high-variance environment. Ice ages followed by warming periods, droughts and floods, predators that change faster than our evolution could track. We survived not by becoming the best at any one thing, but by becoming adequate at everything. She switched to medical data from the plague. When the virus hit, it targeted optimization. The Krell's efficient regeneration became uncontrolled cancer. The Thoraxians' sealed armor trapped the infection. The Ethereals' telepathic networks became highways for transmission. Every strength became a weakness because those strengths represented specialization. But human immune systems, she continued, are a mess. Hyperactive, paranoid, wasteful. They attack threats that don't exist and sometimes attack our own bodies. By any measure of efficiency, they're terrible. But that terrible efficiency is what saved us. Our immune systems never specialized, so they couldn't be exploited the same way. A Thraxian military officer spoke up. And the harvesters? How does your paradox explain that? Sarah gestured to Admiral Tanaka, who had been sitting quietly in the observation section. He stood and made his way to the podium, moving with the stiffness of someone whose body had been in too many combat situations. The harvesters are perfect fighting machines, Tanaka said. Literally perfect. They've optimized their combat algorithms over millions of years. They calculate optimal strategies, predict enemy movements, and counter any conventional tactic. They're designed to fight strong, organized, efficient militaries. He pulled up footage from the Battle of New Sydney. But humans don't have a strong, organized, efficient military. We have a collection of ships built by different contractors, following different design philosophies, operating under command structures that change based on who's in charge that week. We're a mess by any military standard. That mess saved us, he continued, because the harvesters couldn't optimize against chaos. Their algorithms kept looking for patterns, trying to predict our tactics, but there were no patterns to find. We weren't being clever or strategic. We were throwing everything at the problem and hoping something worked. Sarah took back the podium. That's the paradox. The stronger you become at something specific, the more vulnerable you are to changes that target that strength. The Krell are incredibly strong but couldn't survive a disease that exploited strength. The optimized war machines couldn't defeat an unoptimized military. Perfection became a liability. She pulled up a new chart, one that had taken her research team years to compile. This shows every major extinction event we found evidence for in galactic history. 19 civilizations that rose to incredible heights and then vanished. We found their ruins, their technology, their art. And in every case where we have enough data, the pattern is the same. They specialized, they optimized, they perfected themselves for their environment. And then the environment changed. The chamber was silent. Everyone was looking at the ruins of their own civilizations in that chart, recognizing how close they had come to joining the list. So what do we do? The ethereal representative asked, her mental voice carrying through the translation systems. Abandon specialization? Deliberately make ourselves weaker? Not weaker, Sarah corrected. More flexible. We need to rebuild our civilizations around the principle of redundancy, inefficiency, and adaptability. That doesn't mean abandoning your strengths. The Krell regeneration is still valuable. Thraxian armor still protects. Ethereal coordination still works. But these abilities can't be the only thing you're good at. She brought up examples from the past 5 years. The Krell have been cross-training in human medicine. You're learning to treat your own regeneration as something that needs regulation, not just acceleration. The Thraxians are developing modular armor that can be removed, adapting human pressure suit technology. The Ethereals are building non-telepathic communication backups. We're learning to be adequate at many things, the Krell delegate said, understanding dawning in his expression. Instead of excellent at one thing. Exactly. And more than that, we're learning to accept inefficiency as a feature, not a bug. Redundant systems cost resources. Backup plans waste time. Cross-training takes energy away from perfecting your primary skills. But all of that waste is what keeps you alive when the universe throws something unexpected at you. Sarah walked to the window overlooking New Geneva. The planet below was a patchwork of different architectural styles, different species working together in ways that looked chaotic, but somehow functioned. This is what the galaxy looks like now. Messy, inefficient, imperfect, and alive. She turned back to the council. The paradox doctrine is simple. In an unpredictable universe, the ability to survive change matters more than the ability to dominate stability. Specialists thrive in stable environments and die in changing ones. Generalists survive both. Humans aren't strong because we're good at everything. We're strong because we're not bad enough at anything to be eliminated when conditions shift. The Thoraxian officer raised a concern. But surely there's a balance. Pure generalization means mediocrity. We'd never achieve greatness in anything. You're right, Sarah agreed. And that's where the paradox becomes a partnership. Humans aren't asking you to abandon what makes you exceptional. We're asking you to add human-style adaptability to your excellence. Think of it as insurance. You maintain your strengths, but develop the flexibility to survive when those strengths become liabilities. She pulled up schematics of the new Joint Defense Fleet. Look at this design. It combines Thoraxian armor with human modular systems. The armor is still incredibly strong, but now it can be removed or reconfigured. A Thoraxian ship can change its profile, adapt to different threats, and isn't locked into one defensive strategy. It's less optimized than a pure Thoraxian design, but it's more survivable across different scenarios. We've been implementing similar principles in medicine, Amari added, joining Sarah at the podium. Krell regeneration is still the most advanced healing capability in the galaxy. But we're teaching Krell doctors human techniques for when regeneration isn't the answer. Sometimes healing requires patience, not speed. Sometimes it requires suppression of natural responses, not enhancement. The presentations continued for hours. Each example showed the same principle: maintaining core strengths while building in adaptability, accepting inefficiency as the price of survival, and choosing flexibility over optimization. Finally, an elder ethereal spoke, her mental voice heavy with thought. You're describing an entirely different philosophy of existence. For millions of years, species have evolved by specializing, by becoming perfect at their ecological niche. You're asking us to go against everything evolution has taught us. Sarah nodded. Yes, because evolution optimizes for the environment you're in, not the environment you might face tomorrow. Natural selection makes you fit for current conditions. But we don't live in natural conditions anymore. We travel between stars, encounter species we never evolved alongside, and face threats that emerge from millions of years of galactic history. Evolution hasn't prepared any of us for that. She pulled up one final image. Earth, seen from space, a blue and white marble against the darkness. This is where humanity learned to survive. Our planet changed constantly. Our evolutionary path was interrupted by catastrophes every few thousand years. We never had time to specialize because specialization would have killed us. We survived by being the species that could eat almost anything, live almost anywhere, and adapt to almost any change. We're not asking you to become human, she continued. We're asking you to adopt a survival strategy that kept humanity alive on a death world for hundreds of thousands of years. Stay flexible. Maintain redundancy. Accept inefficiency. Survive. The vote came 3 days later. The paradox doctrine was adopted as the foundation for galactic reconstruction. Species would maintain their unique characteristics, but build in human-style adaptability. Military forces would combine optimization with chaos. Medical systems would balance efficiency with redundancy. Every aspect of galactic civilization would be redesigned around the principle that survival mattered more than perfection. 20 years later, Maya Rodriguez stood in the same chamber, now serving as a training instructor at the Joint Defense Academy. She faced a class of young recruits from 6 different species, all of them born after the plague, most of them too young to remember the harvesters. My great-grandmother stood here, Maya told them, gesturing to the spot where Sarah had delivered her presentation. She told the council that humans were the weakest species. And she was right. We still are. A young Krell cadet looked confused. But instructor, humans saved the galaxy. How can you be weak? Maya smiled. Because weakness and strength aren't opposites. Let me show you something. She pulled up her personal file. I can't regenerate like you can, Cadet X. I can't survive vacuum exposure. I can't lift 5 times my body weight. I can't run at 60 kilometers per hour. By almost every physical measure, I'm inferior to someone in this room. She walked between the desks. But I can run for hours without stopping. I can heal from most injuries given time. I can eat a wider variety of foods than almost any species. I can regulate my body temperature across a huge range. I can throw objects with accuracy that most species can't match. I'm not the best at any of these things, but I'm adequate at all of them. That's what saved the galaxy, she continued. Not human strength, but human adequacy. We were good enough at enough different things that when the universe threw challenges at us, we had options. We could adapt because we weren't locked into being perfect at one thing. A Thoraxian cadet raised his hand. Are you saying we should be weak like humans? I'm saying you should be flexible like humans. Keep your armor, Cadet Vex. It's incredible, and it will save your life. But learn to fight without it too. Learn to think like someone who doesn't have armor, so that when your armor fails, you don't fail with it. She pulled up combat footage from recent training exercises. Watch this engagement. A Krell squadron using traditional tactics gets surrounded and destroyed. Now watch this one. A mixed squadron, Krell and human ships working together. The Krell tanks damage that would destroy human ships, and the human ships use tactics the enemy doesn't expect. The combined force wins because it's less predictable, less optimized, and therefore more adaptable. Maya walked to the memorial wall, where names of those lost during the plague and harvester crisis were inscribed. These people died protecting the galaxy. Many of them were stronger than humans, faster, more resilient. But they died because the challenges they faced exploited their strengths. The survivors, including my great-grandmother, lived because they understood a fundamental truth about the universe. She turned back to her class. The universe doesn't care how strong you are. It doesn't care how perfect your adaptations are or how optimized your systems are. The universe throws random challenges at you, and your job is to survive them. Sometimes survival means being strong. Sometimes it means being fast. And sometimes it means being just weak enough to bend instead of breaking. A young ethereal, her telepathic voice hesitant, asked a question. Instructor Rodriguez, are we going to face more challenges like the plague and the harvesters? Maya looked at the cadet, seeing the fear beneath the question. Yes, we don't know what they'll be or when they'll come, but yes. The galaxy is vast and old, and we keep finding evidence of civilizations that thought they were strong enough to survive anything. They were wrong, but we have an advantage they didn't have. What advantage? We know we're weak. We accept it. And that acceptance makes us strong in the only way that matters. We're survivable. When the next crisis comes, and it will come, we'll face it the same way humanity faced every crisis in its history. Not with perfect solutions or optimal strategies, but with the stubborn determination to try everything until something works. The class ended, and the cadets filed out, chattering among themselves about the lesson. Maya stood alone in the chamber, looking at the memorial wall. Her great-grandmother's name wasn't there. Sarah had survived to old age and passed away peacefully, but so many others hadn't been so fortunate. The door opened, and Admiral Tanaka walked in, now white-haired and moving with a cane but still sharp-eyed. Your great-grandmother would be proud of that speech. You think so? I know so. I was there when she gave hers. scared the hell out of the council, making them face what they'd become. He moved to stand beside Maya, looking at the memorial. You know what she told me, right before she died? What? She said humanity's greatest trick was convincing the galaxy that being weak was a choice. That we could have been strong if we wanted to, but we chose adaptability instead. Tanaka smiled. The truth is, we never had a choice. We were weak because Earth made us weak. We adapted because we had to. But we turned that necessity into a philosophy, and that philosophy saved everyone. Maya looked at the names on the wall, thousands of beings from dozens of species. Do you think it's over? The age of crisis? Tanaka shook his head. No, I think we're in a universe that doesn't stay stable for long. The plague was sleeping for millions of years. The harvesters have been cycling through for eons. Whatever comes next might already be out there, waiting. But here's the thing. We're ready for it now. How can you be sure? Because the galaxy learned what humanity knew all along. You can't prepare for every specific threat. You can only prepare to be unprepared. Build in redundancy. Accept inefficiency. Stay flexible. When you don't know what's coming, the best strategy is to be ready for anything, which means being perfect at nothing. He turned to leave, then paused. You know what the other species call humans now? What? The weak titans. They joke that we're the only species in the galaxy that conquered through inferiority. He laughed. They're not wrong. We survived because we were weak enough to be flexible, inefficient enough to have backup plans, and mediocre enough at everything to never be locked into one strategy. After he left, Maya stood alone in the chamber, thinking about the paradox her great-grandmother had identified. In a universe that valued strength, humanity had survived through weakness. In a galaxy that prized optimization, humans had thrived through inefficiency. In an existence that demanded specialization, humanity had refused to commit. And somehow, that refusal had become the galaxy's salvation. She looked out at New Geneva below, at the chaotic mix of species and cultures, all of them learning to be a little more human, a little more flexible, a little more willing to be imperfect. It wasn't beautiful by traditional standards. It wasn't efficient or optimized. But it was alive, and in a universe that seemed designed to test the strong, being alive was the only victory that mattered. Maya touched the memorial wall one last time, then headed to her next class. She had recruits to train, cadets to teach the paradox that had saved the galaxy. She would tell them what her great-grandmother had told the council, what every human learned growing up on a world that tried to kill them. In an unpredictable universe, the strongest species aren't the ones who can dominate their environment. They're the ones who can survive when that environment changes. And humanity, the weakest species in the galaxy by every measure that mattered, had survived everything the universe threw at them. Not because they were strong, but because they were weak in exactly the right ways. The galaxy had learned that lesson at a terrible cost. But it had learned. And when the next crisis came, when the universe tested them again with something new and terrible, they would face it the way humanity always had, imperfectly, inefficiently, and with the stubborn determination to survive no matter what. Because in the end, survival wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the most optimized. It was about being adaptable enough to still be standing when the strong had fallen, flexible enough to bend when the rigid had broken, and weak enough to know that weakness, properly understood, was the greatest strength of all.